Welcome to Senior Living Live. My name is Janae Sherman, and I'm so glad to have an opportunity to host the show today. I'm really excited because one of our favorite guests is here today, Susan Robbins. She is Arbor Company's dementia expert and knows so much about the signs and symptoms of dementia, but also how you can find the best care if you're dealing with memory loss. She's an excellent resource for those who are providing care for someone with memory loss or dementia. Susan's here today to answer a question that so many people have. Is it dementia or normal aging? And if you're noticing changes in yourself or perhaps a change in someone you know, you've probably asked yourself this very question. So I'm glad you're here today to get your questions answered. Now, just a little housekeeping before I turn it over to Susan. She's going to begin her presentation here in a moment, but if you have questions for her, make sure to scroll down and click the Q&A button below and type in your questions as they come to you. We will make sure to answer all the questions once Susan is done with her presentation. So with that, I believe we're ready to get started. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're ready, we can jump right in.
I am ready, and thank you for having me. This is such an important topic to help everyone, not just those living with dementia, but everybody else as well, because dementia touches so many different people's lives and in different ways. I'm going to start. I found this and I thought it was kind of funny, but it's also very appropriate if you love somebody living with dementia. Two of the greatest qualities to have in life is patience and wisdom. I can't teach you patience, but hopefully after you go through this class today, you're going to have a little more wisdom to help your loved one living with dementia, or maybe answer some of those questions that scare you. Do I have it? So, normal aging, a fun fact. We all need to hear something 3 times before it is committed to long-term memory. And if you're over the age of 65, you need that same information 4 times before it sticks in your mind and you're able to truly hang on to it. So if you can't remember the name of a movie, just say it 3 times in your head because you've already heard it once and you're more apt to remember it. It's okay to walk into a room and not remember what you came in there for. And if you have a family history of people living with dementia, these are everyday things that happen to everybody. But as we age, you get a little concerned about them. That's normal aging. Heck, it happens all the way through life. But it just is more, hits you harder if you're older. But it's normal because you also know you walked in there for something. Whereas with dementia, you don't even remember why you walked in the room, but you also don't remember that you were looking for something. And that's kind of that difference. And it also takes you longer to do the same things that you have always done in the past. Maybe it used to get up on Saturday morning and clean your whole house by noon. And maybe now it's 4 or 5 o'clock and you still hadn't finished. That's normal aging. Routine things that you've always done, unfortunately, as you get older, take longer to do. But from a clinical standpoint, what is dementia? What do you look for? It's a group because there's 70 different types of dementia. And what we want to do is figure out whether it's dementia and how it's changing, because each dementia is a little different, but these are the fundamental things that are the same with all different types of dementia. It's a group of thinking and social symptoms that interfere with your daily function. It's not a specific disease. Dementia is a group of conditions characterized that impair 2 brain functions, such as memory loss and judgment. Some people, it may not be memory loss at first. That may happen much later, and I may lose some motor skills. So it's a change in what your normal day-to-day life has been. Symptoms include forgetfulness, limited social skills. You start to not be able to fit quite in or feel uneasy around people, impulse control, thinking ability, and also, again, affects your daily function. So what does that mean from a big picture standpoint? There is normal aging, and then there is dementia. With normal aging, you move a little slower. Like I said before, what used to take 5 minutes can take 15 or 20 minutes now. Even simple things that you've always done. But those living with dementia start to lose the ability to complete tasks at first. I start to do something and I don't complete it. We always think about things like, you've probably heard that, you forget to put the toothpaste on, but maybe I made a grilled cheese sandwich and I use the little cheese squares and I forget to take the paper off of it. I can still do things, but I don't necessarily do them the correct way. And that's where it becomes a concern. I miss steps or forget steps altogether. Hesitating more, your brain slows down as you age. You don't process information as quickly as you used to, but you still can do everything and remember everything and physically do things, but you may need a little help doing them. You may not be able to get up and down off the floor the same way you used to. That's not a dementia symptom. That's just a symptom of age. But people living with dementia have a tendency to become withdrawn and don't make good decisions. When you have a loved one living with dementia, or if you're questioning it yourself and you find yourself withdrawing from social situations because you don't want anybody to see your deficits, those are the times that you want to seek some medical advice, because there's something going on and you want to determine whether it is dementia or something else. I can't quite fit in the way I used to. I feel uneasy in social settings that I used to feel very social in, and I don't make good decisions. It's 10 degrees outside and I go outside in a short sleeve shirt because I just can't sequence things all the way through and what's good and what's not. I may not remember to take my medicine, or I may decide I just don't want to take it. Or maybe I'm driving and I'm not safe to drive anymore. And I could stop doing things altogether. I love this one because I've always had this problem. Difficulty with name recall is normal aging. So if that's something that concerns you, just take a deep breath and let go of it. It's okay. Even people that you've known all your life, the name may just not come up as quickly as it used to, but it's there. Or I know my neighbor, but I can't recall her name. That's okay. We have a lot going on in our lives, and that's just part of life. But it does come to you later on. And you know it. And that's kind of where that difference is, because living with dementia, in the middle stages, I stopped recognizing what role people play in my life. It's not that I don't recognize you at all. I just don't recognize who you are in relation to my life. Many times, unfortunately, a spouse may not recognize the other spouse anymore. And some of that has to do with traveling back in time. Dementia takes you back in time. So if I think I'm 20 and my 80-year-old husband thinks I'm his wife, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm 20, I'm not married to that 80-year-old man. Why does he think I'm his wife? And then that creates the fear and the anxiety. I might even tell somebody I don't know them and I've never met them before, when they've been a very important part of my life, because I'm recalling that person at a different age. I may think my grandchildren are my children. Pausing to find words, normal aging. You may have even caught me doing that a couple of times while we're going through this presentation. Want to make sure I get everything right. But I can describe something to you easily if I can't come up with the name of it. But living with dementia, I have problems finding my words, but more importantly, understanding yours. If I have limited recall of words to communicate my needs to you, when you use more words to describe something to me or help me try to understand something, I can become frustrated because you have given me a bunch of words that are no longer part of my vocabulary. And it usually starts with nouns. And I will also, instead of flip-flops, it's flop-flips. I'll reverse things sometimes too, and be totally unaware of it. So if you have somebody living with dementia, don't correct those things. It doesn't matter. Needing reminders, we all need reminders. We're busy. Some like to write a handwritten note to remind themselves. Maybe it's in my phone. But with normal aging, I know I'm going to the doctor's next week. And gosh, I know it's Wednesday and in the morning, I can't recall what time, but I know how to go back and retrieve that information. I know it's on my refrigerator, or I know it's in my phone. But people living with dementia can't recall recent information. And more importantly, I don't remember that you wrote it and put it on the refrigerator for me to remind me to do it. Or I can't find that phone number that you've written in big letters because I can't associate that those numbers are a phone number to let me call you or connect with you. I also may not even recall that I've eaten breakfast, because the brain is connected to all our organs in our body and tells them what to do. So if my brain is not registering that I've just eaten, I don't remember that I've eaten. And my brain is not telling me that I'm full. Please get them something else to eat. You don't have to give me another whole meal, but give me something, because nobody wants to feel hungry. And nobody wants to be reminded that they've done something that they don't recall doing. That creates anxiety and frustration between the two of you. And you can see in this picture, the brain on the right, as you face the screen, excuse me, on the left, as you face the screen, is that of a 75-year-old healthy person, healthy in dementia-wise. And that other brain is also a 75-year-old brain with somebody living with dementia. They are really doing the very best they can with what they have left. Those connective tissues don't connect anymore. And dementia is actually the death of the brain cells. That's why we've had struggled so hard to come up with cures or to stop it, because once that brain cell has died, it's gone and we can't bring it back. Dementia is much more than forgetfulness. It affects how your brain works. We kind of wrote the simple day-to-day things. Impulse control is actually the first sign that somebody is struggling with dementia. It is not memory loss. If I think it, I'm going to say it. And sometimes they can say things very inappropriate to strangers or people that they love, because I just don't think through the consequences of my actions. I no longer have that ability. And the frontal temporal lobe goes. My attention span is very short because I can't stay focused. So you might have me doing something and then I just get up and go do something else and totally unaware that I haven't finished. Maybe I was eating and I just get up and stop eating and go do something else. TV shows are very hard for people with dementia to follow. It may be on for company of a voice, but long things or complicated things I can't follow and I get frustrated. Problem solving. Problem solving is huge. And what happens, I can't think through things, consequences, what's going to happen. You know, I need a shower because I'm in hygiene. I no longer understand the importance of hygiene. It's not that I don't want a shower. I just don't feel like one right now. And lots of times, well, you need one. And it's like, well, no, I don't. Plus, I'm an adult. I may think I've already had it. And why are you talking to me about my shower? Because 10 years ago, you wouldn't have asked your loved one if they'd had a shower. So sometimes when we try to help somebody living with dementia, we ask them things that you wouldn't have asked before, but they're not aware of their deficits, and it's very confusing to them. Sequencing, it goes back to remembering to put toothpaste on a toothbrush, or I'll put my shoes on without my socks, or put my socks on over my shoes. Simple things. I might eat bread and then just put butter on the side of the plate and eat them separately when I wanted the bread and the butter together. Memory loss, of course, happens with everybody with dementia, but I travel back in time. My short-term memory goes. And lots of times this is where people get, maybe it's not dementia because I can tell old stories, but I can't tell new things that have just happened. I may tell you I've done nothing all day, but you went out and did all kinds of things together. But when asked somebody else, well, I didn't do anything today. I don't have that recall of memory, but I may tell you a story from the past because I can remember that and I'm kind of living in the past. Those are past stories to you, but to the person living with dementia, it may just be a memory of present to that person. Dementia is far more, again, than forgetfulness. It affects how we process language and how we comprehend. We know that they lose their words and they can't figure things out. But more importantly, they don't comprehend what we're asking them to do. People living with dementia rely on your body language far more than what you're saying. Always give visual cues and choices to help somebody have a better day and have a better quality of life. Don't try to over-explain. If I didn't understand your simple explanation, if you give me more words, I'm going to become more confused. And that's kind of how you know that difference. Is it normal aging or is it dementia? If I might not like the fact that you've explained something to me twice, but I understand why you've done it because I didn't understand it. With dementia, I don't know that I didn't understand it. Vision is also affected, but not like the vision. If I take my glasses off, I can't read the screen anymore. It's how I process the world. My world becomes very small and I lose my peripheral vision. I want you all to put on binoculars as you're sitting in your chair watching this webinar, and you can feel really silly, but notice all of a sudden, wherever you're sitting, if you do this, what's over here has just disappeared. So just take a second. That is why it is so important to always approach somebody from the front and make sure that you have that eye contact and you're regaining eye contact. Because if you move to the left a little or to the right a little, they may not know you're there anymore. Fine motor skills and sensory tolerance. Fine motor skills are more in the later stages of dementia, but some people lose them earlier. I have struggled with doing buttons. I'm using a knife and a fork. So set me up for success in order to do that. Find things that I can eat or make sure that it's easy to cut in the beginning stages. Watch for me. And you've got the big brain, so make the adjustments to make things easier for them instead of trying to bring them back to who they used to be. That person and that skill set disappears slowly with dementia. And the best way to love that person is to set them up for success based on what they can still do. Sensory tolerance. Noise and background noises. I call it's kind of you hear everything, but you don't know what it is. And lots of times you think, well, they're not paying attention or this, that, and the other, or they're just all of a sudden this. It's because I hear everything. I call it acute dementia hearing, but I don't know what those things are. It can be simple things. Your air conditioning in your home, when it clicks off and on, and the fan goes off and on, we all hear it. We don't pay any attention to it. But if I'm living with dementia, I don't comprehend what that sound is, and it can be very scary. If somebody's walking up behind you, you can hear them walking up and you can understand that there's somebody behind you. But to somebody living with dementia, you just were all of a sudden there out of nowhere. Or that sound scared me because I didn't know what it was. So if you're having trouble communicating with somebody living with dementia, it may be more about the sensory tolerance. Go ahead and turn the TV off. Don't try to compete with the TV, because I get distracted by those sounds and those different things. And soft music, but make sure your music doesn't have words to it if you're trying to communicate with me. Feeling effect of the ability to communicate with others. We have all had some of these feelings. These are normal feelings. Sometimes you feel lost, confused, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, or bewildered. But if we ever feel that way, it's temporary. Those are temporary feelings. But living with dementia, I can feel like that most of the day. So when I repeat things and need things, think about a time that you felt lost or confused about something, and almost everything you do feels confusing. That's the world that somebody living with dementia feels. And we can help them feel successful and needed, and not take away what they can do, but help them still do the things that they can. Communication tips. If you're a caregiver with somebody living with dementia, actively listen to the person with dementia, because whatever I'm telling you is probably I have a need, or I just want to feel valued. So listen to me and don't correct me. If I call people by the wrong names, or I'm telling a story and it's not like you remembered it at all, it doesn't matter. It's how they feel in the moment and what their recall is. And instead of living in a fact-based world, people living with dementia live in an emotional world. It's not about the facts anymore. It's about how I feel in the moment. Repeat back what they're saying in a question. I need to go to the yada yada. I need to go to the yada yada. Well, we don't know what yada yada is, but you're needing to go to the yada yada. You can actually watch somebody calmly reach a level of communication with you if you repeat back what they're saying, because they feel understood. And people living with dementia have a hard time making their needs known, and they need to feel like you understand them. Validate their concerns. Ooh, I'm cold. Well, I'll turn the heat up. That doesn't fix anything. I don't understand what that means anymore. But, ooh, I'm sorry you're cold. Validate it so they know you understood it. It's not about fixing a problem. It's more about acknowledging it. Use visual cues. Your hands if you don't have anything, but a visual cue, and offer choices. And if you're not smiling right now, or you're not smiling before you start interacting with somebody living with dementia, take a second, take your deep breath, and put that smile back on your face, because people living with dementia read your body language. You want to meet them where they are. If they're unhappy, you don't want to have a great big grin, but you do want to have a calming smile on your face. And they need to be reassured that they're safe and it's okay. Be aware of your body language, your smile. Always have open palms. That sounds silly. Most of us stand with our hands partially closed, but if you leave your palms open, you will find that person living with dementia much easier way for them to approach you or feel comfortable around you. Eye contact, and regain eye contact. If you lose eye contact with somebody living with dementia, you've lost their attention, and you need to be the one to regain eye contact. Move to wherever their head has turned. Live where they are. remember, you're working with a working brain and they are not. So wherever they are is where we need to go instead of bringing them back to what we wish they were. Repetitive questions mean that somebody living with dementia has unmet needs. What time is lunch? What time is lunch? What time is lunch? What time is lunch? What I'm really telling you is I'm hungry, but I've lost my communication skills, but lunch is still part of my vocabulary. So I'm going to repeat back those questions over and over again. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm now happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Susan. That was great as usual and full of so much helpful information. I really love every time that you join us with these conversations because it's so great to hear. And we've already got a few questions here in the box, but as Susan said, she's ready to answer any questions. So if you have one, if you think of one, go ahead and scroll down to the Q&A, click that, type your question in the box, and I will read it to Susan. We're going to try to go up right to the hour. So if you want to make sure if you have a question that you get it in before we have to end. So let's jump in here while we wait for more questions to come. I see we already have a few in here. And so I'm going to ask this question first because this is probably something that's really top of mind. But Ellen asks, hasn't the pandemic affected people's social skills? So we're talking about normal aging versus memory loss. And this is a good one because you're talking about the social skills of people who have dementia or memory loss. So do you have any information about that, of what you've seen since the pandemic and how that affects people as they age as well?
It has affected our seniors, as it's, in all honesty, as it's affected all of us. One of the fundamental things to survive is human touch. And people living with dementia, unfortunately, people are afraid to touch somebody living with dementia. They're afraid they're going to hurt them, they're going to break them, they're not going to understand. So that has already taken place, and the pandemic did make some of those things worse. The social isolation for those living alone, but it also, if I have dementia, it's made it harder for me to come back out because I've been able to hide my dementia. Because you can't always pick it up on if you have a loved one that doesn't live with you and lives out of state, and you call and you ask them what they had for lunch, and they say, well, I had a tuna fish sandwich. Well, if you live close by, there wasn't any tuna in the house. But maybe I always ate tuna fish sandwiches. So it's hard to get those facts because I still have social chit chat, but I don't. So yes, it does. And any senior in your life needs a lot of extra hugs right now as they come out of this and changing our approach. And, from a care perspective in our communities as well, it is so wonderful now to be able to interact with our residents on that same level, because only being touched for care doesn't feel so good. But now we can go back to our hand massages and all those extra things that make a huge difference in somebody's life living with dementia.
That's a really good point. And I want to get back to that about the different things that you can expect in a memory care community. But when you were talking about that question, the answer, it made me think about people who are going to start the holiday season and they're going to go back. And now that we can visit people again and we're traveling again. And so we might go home and really notice some of those things that mom, dad, or grandparents are doing that make us concerned. So do you have anything to tell us as we're going into and we're traveling for the holiday season, what we can look for, or any words of advice there?
It is. First, if you haven't physically seen somebody in a long time, there's going to be the natural decline, whether there's dementia or not. Because as people get older, the age process, the physical age process is faster. So, and then if that person was isolated, but you also just want to look at when you have questions? Do they recognize who you are? You know, maybe they won't, maybe it'll take a minute, or maybe they'll pretend to. One of the things, do you have somebody that normally didn't laugh at things and all of a sudden they're laughing? That actually can be a sign of dementia, where in the early stages, I'm covering up. I don't know the answer, so I just kind of laugh and giggle. Or all of a sudden, everybody has a nickname, where in the past they didn't. Those are kind of some of those little things that you can see. If somebody's house was always in very good order, and all of a sudden it's not, but they get frustrated with you if you try to touch anything, then that's going to be one of those signs of doing things. And kind of watch, you know, we know medications, are they taking them? People with dementia are not good historians on whether they're taking their medications or not, or whether they've been to the doctor. So from a distance, those things are hard to watch, but you're going to see a lot of those changes. So watch for them. And you know, a giggle is not something that you would think would be a sign of dementia. But if all of this, it happens quite often, and it's a change in my personality. I'm not the same person I used to be. I used to love to have all the grandkids around me, and now you just see me kind of withdrawing because it becomes overwhelming.
Okay, yeah, that's really good tips. Thank you. Let's get back to the box and answer some of these questions. From Dawn. Dawn says, I am 85 and have one copy of ApoE4 gene. I've noticed that I can't remember names and directions well at all. I once had a photogenic memory and was an all-A student in microbiology. I have a PhD. Do I need to get a test or something? So how can you help Dawn here?
Well, that's a really good question. And there is a lot of tracking where they're doing different things. I am not a clinician, so I'm a hands-on person helping. But a good neurologist, if you have concerns about where you're going and your ability to recall, but do remember, recall slows down. You're aware of those deficits, so it may not be a problem, even with that gene. Not everybody with genes actually internally have active dementia. There's a lot of research based on that. And if you go to the DAA website, it's Dementia Alliance Dementia Action Alliance. They can give you a lot of the questions that pertain to the different genes and the different things. It's a really good resource.
Oh yes, we've had them on the show before, and so that is a really good resource. So definitely make sure to check that out as well. It looks like we've got a couple more questions coming in here. So Sue asks, she says here, my mom's dementia had an early period of really intense paranoia, mostly towards me since I was closest. That ended after 3.5 years. It started a few months after she had a severe injury above her right eye, and it looks very severe, turned black and blue down to her waist. Could that early spell have been due to a brain injury? And I know you reminded us you're not a clinician, but what do you think about this? Have you seen anything like this before?
Well, it could have been from a fall or from an injury. I mean, brain injuries are very similar in the beginning of different things, and especially to the frontal temporal lobe, which is your judgment and your reasoning, and the paranoia because I can't figure things out. I think the biggest thing is whether it's dementia from an inheritance or what it is some form of dementia. That from what you're saying, again, not a clinician, but I've done this for a long time. So the thing is to meet her where she is. And with paranoia, can be things like lots of times they think you've stolen their things or taking their things. And what it is they've misplaced their things, or they're looking for something that no longer exists. One thing that happens with women a lot, they'll have their purse and they're saying they're looking for your purse. And they'll say, well, it's right there. And they're going, no, no, no. Well, you're thinking because you got a fully functioning brain. Yeah, that is your purse and it's right there. But what I'm looking for is the little red purse I owned 30 years ago because of the dementia. Or in your mom's case, from what you're saying, maybe it was something I owned a year ago, or didn't get moved, or it's packed away. But I can't communicate well enough to say, no, it's not this purse, it's the other one. I just say, no, that's not it. I don't know if that answered your question, but definitely brain injuries can appear very much like dementia. And you want to be able to still live in their world. I think the biggest thing is people living with dementia can't come back to our world. We have to enter theirs.
Thank you. And Sue, if that doesn't answer your question, please feel free to follow up. But that actually leads me to a question of my own, because my own grandfather he had Alzheimer's. And I remember how stressful with the paranoia, and for my grandmother for taking care of him, it really took a toll on her physical health. And I'm wondering, Susan, you probably have a lot of resources or things you can tell us about caregivers and caregiver burnout. What can you say to people like Sue and myself and my grandmother who have experienced being a caregiver in these positions?
Well, first of all, it is probably one of the toughest jobs anybody ever has, because it is not only physically taxing, it's emotionally taxing. And many other times when you're caring for somebody, there's answers and there's solutions. And with dementia, every day is different. So it's embracing each moment, but it's also very important to not take the things that happen personally. And I know that just sounds so empty to say to somebody, but it's the disease, not the person. And a good way to kind of put that in a different perspective, I have a brain disease and my brain doesn't function right. But if I was in kidney failure, you wouldn't walk up to me and pat me on the back and say, come on, kidneys, start working. You'd accept that I needed a ride to dialysis. If I have dementia, I need you to be patient and have the wisdom not to take things personal.
That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you. And it looks like, let's see, we have a couple more questions here. So Sue did follow up. It says, my mom is in deep dementia now, which is 7+ years after the injury. I've just always been curious about it. She is in an excellent memory care facility. So I'm glad to hear that. It took a toll. I ended up having a mild heart attack. My family who live remotely did not believe me about her attacks. So that kind of really does just follow up with what you were just saying, is that caregivers really do experience a lot of stress. So I think that helps us understand what she was, or what Sue was getting towards. Did you?
And also, I'm just going to add, we don't have any control over who's in our family and their opinions of how we're handling things. And if you're not living it every day, you don't have the same perspective. Well, just get mom to the doctor. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. If you're the one that's actually having to make those things happen and meet that person living with dementia where they are and doing things. So I think it goes back to all family members care, but a really good tip for families is finding out what each family member's skill set is. If Betty is good with money, let Betty handle all the finances. If Sally's good at making appointments, she can make the doctor's appointments, but I can take mom because she can't handle doing it, so that everybody has a role and a responsibility. And if you don't have that many family members, then maybe it's just one thing, but that person that sometimes is hard for you to deal with, give them a role, give them something to do, because a lot of, and as caregivers, you get a lot of guilt over what needs to be done. And to be honest too, people living with dementia, we many times try to keep people at home. If they are living with their cognitive peers, they feel better because they don't have to have their guard up all the time. Because like I said, I may not recognize what role you play in my life, but I still love you, because what I have left is feelings, and that chemistry that makes us love people and care about people, that doesn't go away with dementia. What goes away is the role you have in my life. So you can come in and enjoy that time with them, with little things, reminiscing with old things. You know, if you always had ice cream with your mother, then you keep having ice cream. You know, and at the point where I can't eat the ice cream with a spoon anymore, you bring me a milkshake. It's making the adjustments to meet that person where they are.
That's an excellent point. I always felt with my own grandparents that if finding the best situation for them that outside of the home, because the home was not a safe place for them to stay.
To stay, yes.
Yes, they had one really very steep. They lived in Washington D.C. had a very steep staircase and things like that. So those safety issues that would pop up. I see a really good question here, and it kind of goes along with the one we just had. It's anonymous. Is it normal for someone who has dementia to constantly think their spouse is having an affair? My relative is 90 years old and has been married for 60 years. He has a dutiful wife, but he sees things that are not there and is constantly accusing her of infidelity. And this sounds a lot like the last question with the attacks and the delusions. So is that something that we would see with someone who has dementia?
Actually, yes, it is. If it makes you feel any better, it is very common. Because what happens is with somebody living with dementia, the roles change in life. And it is very common because it's like, where are you? Why aren't you doing this? You must be out somewhere having the affair. Otherwise you would be here. You know, maybe your situation has changed where you're not sleeping in the same room, but you did in the past. I mean, I don't know your circumstances, but you can put this together with whatever it is. It's just not comfortable. So you're not here. Where are you? Or maybe in the moment, I don't even recognize who you are. Therefore, I'm looking for somebody much younger because I think I'm 40 years old. So I'm looking for you when you were 40. So I don't recognize your role in my life. And it's time to go to bed, or it's time to eat breakfast or have our morning coffee. And you're not there to do those things. And that's where that paranoia comes in, because I'm trying to make sense of something that doesn't make any sense to me. It is very hard if it's your loved one and they're accusing you of doing these things because of the in and out of it, but it is actually a very common phenomenon with people living with dementia.
That's what I expected. I suspected that. But thank you for answering that question. I know that must be difficult. And we still have more questions coming in. Make sure if you have any more, we still have about 15 minutes or so. So make sure you get your questions in. But Tiffany has a question about how can you convince a person with dementia to declutter things that are no longer needed? Do you have any good tips for that?
Well, first of all, you don't do it in front of them, and you do it gradually if it is actually necessary from a safety perspective. People living with dementia, what you think is trash is very important to them. It is, like I said, I mean, there's a safety side of that, but is that the battle you want to have with your loved one when you're interacting with them? Now, if it's spilling out into your home or different things, I mean, I'm not saying that you just blanket don't do anything, or if it's a hoarding situation where somebody's not safe. But if it's, you know, a stack of mail that never gets touched, but I don't want you to throw it out, because I think there's something in there, but I can't recall what it is that I'm supposed to do. But if you throw that out, I'm going to lose something that I think is important to me, even though you know it's not. So it's done gradually. You're not going to convince them that things that they think are important to them aren't important. And that's kind of that different, that's that living in their world and making sure that they feel happy and secure, because that stack of papers are the empty cans of soup. Make me feel safe and secure. You don't want to remove what makes somebody feel safe and secure, and sometimes clutter does to somebody with dementia. You will also find that people that used to have just immaculate faucets and kitchen cabinets and everything was always in place, and all of a sudden it's just not. It's not to you because it doesn't look like it did before that person had dementia. But in actuality, the person living with dementia that rearranges everything, they have rearranged it to meet the dementia mind's needs. Leave it alone. As
Okay,
hard as it is to do.
so choosing your battles is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
So, oh, and Tiffany did follow up. Thank you for that clarification. They have a 3 storage unit that he thinks is his home. So sounds like a lot of clutter.
Yes. And, maybe you do it by a few things at a time and let him pick out a few things out of there. Let's move a couple of these things. Instead of throwing them out, let's move a few of these things.
And, well, this question really, we get this one a lot, is what you should do when you're trying to have that discussion when it's no longer safe to be at home. And just like Tiffany's loved one is trying to declutter, they're trying to, reluctant to let go of things. How do we help someone who's reluctant to get into memory care or to seek help for their memory loss? I would imagine that would be very difficult.
It is very difficult. And there is no magic, thing that I can share at the end of this that's going to fix it all. But what I can tell you is it's make your plans. If somebody's in the later stages of dementia, you've had them at home and they're no longer safe, convincing somebody they are no longer safe is a losing battle. Because of course I'm safe. I've always lived here. There's a lot of emotions and I don't have that judgment and reasoning to understand. So if you start to get the pushback, stop the conversation. Find where you want a new home for that person or whatever the next steps are going to be. You don't have to have this long conversation with them because it's going to like ripping a Band-Aid off. If you do it slowly, it is far more painful than pulling it off. And what I mean by that is get your plans in a row of what you want to have done. Find that if they're no longer capable of finding a place, because we always think, well, if they can pick the place. The place they picked was home, not some other place. And you're not going to change that. So don't have long month conversations about things and create anxiety for that person living with dementia. Get everything together that you need to get together, and then you can take them where they need to go. And we're any community, the people in the community can help you, walk you through those steps to make that transition easier. Not easier on you, easier on the person living with dementia, because that's the end goal. And when we tell little lies, then we actually hurt that person living with dementia because they don't trust you. And for whatever reason, if you lie to me and I have dementia, I see through it. I may not know anything else, but I see through those little lies.
Well, you did say they're really good at reading body language. So maybe
Yes.
that might be one of the things that they pick up with that. So what about people who are just in the early stages of dementia? When is it ever too early to seek memory care, or
it's not too early, assisted living communities, independent living communities. It's really wonderful because you get to make friends when you can still make friends, and they become lifetime friends when they live in our communities. Because I'm with my cognitive peers, I can let myself go, meaning I don't have to put that front up. I don't have to giggle because I can have a conversation with this person without doing it. It also allows team members in our communities to get to know your loved one and their habits and their different things. Because we always feel like we know what everybody needs, but we don't always know because you're attached emotionally, and we can come at it from a different approach and help them meet their needs.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you. And so it looks like Sue has followed up with another comment here. I would like to offer some advice. While you are still cognitively healthy, set up your POAs and a will that can protect your family from things that you might change if you end up becoming paranoid. You could easily end up disinheriting the persons who have been closest or most loving and helpful to you. So this is just kind of that's a very, thank you, that's very good advice. Do you have anything else about setting up or when's the right time to prepare for that when you're farther along in your journey?
Well, if you're on this call, you probably should do those things. Either way, just for yourself, because sometimes we're looking at if you're looking at it for your parents, it's not a bad time to do it for yourself. To be very honest, so that people know what your wishes are and they can be honored with a clear mind, and what you want is clear and taken care of. And then you don't have to worry about that part of it. And it makes it much easier on your family and your loved ones. Because once somebody has the early stages of dementia, it's hard, because I think one thing that happens is lots of times money is what comes into those decisions. And, I don't know, I know Jenna, but I don't know the rest of people on the call. But if I said, would you just please give me all your bank account numbers? I am a great money manager. Would you not feel like I just stole your money? Your loved one has managed their money, or their spouse did, either way. It was this person has managed their money and their affairs all their life, and now you're telling them they can't do it. What do I think? Because I've got dementia and I can't reason out, and I still think I can do it. You're stealing from me. So that creates that paranoia, which with somebody with dementia is rational thinking.
Thank you. That's a good point. I would definitely feel a little hesitant to give you all of my information. So
yes,
common sense. Yeah, thank you. And so we were talking about people who have just the beginning stages of dementia or memory loss. And I know that at some Arbor communities, they have a unique program called Bridges. Is that something you could tell us a little bit more about?
I love our Bridges program, because what it happens is, if people are set up for success living with dementia, they can still find a lot of joy and a lot of happiness and a lot of feeling that I'm needed and have a purpose in life. Assisted living, you can still make those things doing. You can still pick up the phone and you can call your loved one because you want to ask a question, or they can call you. You're going to places, you're doing things. Our Bridges neighborhood is kind of that in between. I certainly don't need the oversight of a memory care neighborhood, because I can still do things, but I need the setup to do them. I need the routine to do them. And I need to be with people that are like-minded in my cognitive needs, my cognitive peers. So it's a great opportunity for somebody to still be able to enjoy life. I can, things I used to do, if I was love doing crafts, they're going to be set up where I have all the things in front of me to create that craft. Whereas before, I could go collect those things, I could figure out what to do with them. But here, you're going to give me the step-by-step to do it, to help me be successful. I'm going to lay your clothes out so that you do put on things that match, because sometimes in that middle stage, my clothes don't match, but somebody's just going to lay them out, but it doesn't mean they have to help me put them on unless I need physical help, but from a cognitive standpoint, so that I'm going to look presentable and I'm going to feel good. You're going to remind me to put my necklace on or my earrings on. But you're going to remind me by going, "Ooh, do you want these or these?" And that's that difference. That's that special care that lets somebody feel good about themselves.
Yeah, that's very important. That's very important. And we started this whole conversation talking about whether it is normal aging or whether it's dementia. And we've talked a lot about the dementia. If you think it is normal aging and you're just having some slight memory loss, it's not quite very significant. Do you know of any kind of resources that people can use to help them continue to stay sharp if they're experiencing normal aging?
Normal aging is keeping your mind active. It will not stop If you have dementia and it just hasn't manifest, it is not going to stop dementia. So I don't want to give you that impression. But word games, puzzles, learning a language, driving a different way to the grocery store instead of going your routine way, all those things help keep your mind sharp. Read more, play games, but do things that are different. Don't do the same thing all the time. And that helps keep your brain sharper. So you do hear about those things. It will not stop dementia, but it will make a healthy brain much sharper and sharper longer.
Well, that's a really good point, because I would feel like as I age, I want to be more set in my ways. So I'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
Well, and then you talked about the Dementia Action Alliance a little earlier, and that is an excellent resource. Can you give us any other resources that we could use once we are on the journey of memory loss for ourselves or for a loved one? What other areas could we reach out and get more resources?
So, well, of course, we can always reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. There are also many support groups. There's a frontal temporal lobe dementia support group. There's a Lewy bodies support group. So if you have a specific diagnosis, there are support groups out there. You can just Google them, the frontal temporal lobe, which is usually younger people. So there's a lot of resources there for younger people that starts in. It's kind of an earlier age-wise dementia that happens. So if you have somebody younger in your family or yourself, that may be a possible way to go. Reaching out to others. And then of course, the Arbor Company is a great resource too. You can reach out to any of the communities. Some of our communities have support groups in them, or we can ask questions. We are always here to help people make those transitions, help them get the help that they need, and understand what their loved one is going through.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And I see we have one more follow-up, and I know we're running out of time. So it's from about the same question of the infidelity. Are there any suggestions that you have for the caregiver who's experiencing these accusations? What should she be able to do to handle these kind of paranoia, and how can she manage that?
So, well, first of all, take a deep breath, a big deep breath when they come up. Try to take yourself as much as you can emotionally out of it. And don't try to fix it. If I would never do that, she would never do that, whatever that, if it's you personally, is not fixing it, because that is how they truly feel. If you validate the feeling, and I know you're going, there's no way I'm doing that. I get that, but I am so sorry. That is a horrible way to feel. That is not saying, you're not saying it did it, but you're validating the feelings. And then just be quiet and let it happen. Give them time to respond back. That is the most helpful you can be. But I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that that's easy to do. But when you try to justify something, it actually makes it worse, because again, it goes back to, I am living in my own world and I need validation of my feelings.
That is truly a difficult situation. So I know it has to be handled very sensitively. Thank you for that insight. And I hope that did answer the question for that watcher. So I know that we've run out of time and we've got to let you go. You've got things to do today. But thank you so much for coming and for all of this helpful information. For everyone watching, just a reminder, this webinar will be available starting tomorrow. You'll receive a link to the email you used to RSVP for the webinar, and that way you can share it with friends and family or rewatch it if you'd like to hear this helpful information again. And if you'd like to see more of Susan's previous webinars about dementia, please visit our website, www.seniorlivinglive.com, and you can see all of the webinars she's done before, and also that website has lots of great content about senior living, just of all topics. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. So thanks again, Susan, for speaking with us today. And we appreciate everyone being part of this conversation here on Senior Living Live.
So, thank you, Jenna.
Have a great
And
day,
thank you
everyone.
all for taking the time to join. You means a lot to your loved one living with dementia for you to have this knowledge.
Definitely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.